we've been going after the Instagram Reels and TikTok ads pretty freaking hard together, the last 2 months. And it's like, who knows how long it's going to last, but it's fun. We're trying to innovate. We're trying to test. We're really putting the 502's budget into this test to just see what happens, and it's going well. But it's not like it's all just like, oh man, this is fantastic. It's the same thing we tell you guys. It's like, hey, this is working. Test it, try it, see what's working for you guys, see what you can shake loose. If it stops working, what's the pivot? What's another pivot? We're on like our 5th pivot now when it comes to TikTok ads, and finally it looks like maybe it's saving itself. But so to answer the question is kind of like, what's playing into the Spotify success? It's the longevity, it's the fan base that we have, and it's just the desire to continue to test things with the budget we have available to see if we can make some progress.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Indiepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy. With me is my awesome co-host, Ed Isola from the 502s. Ed, what's up, dude? Welcome to episode 200.
I feel like I should do like a Bruce Buffer impersonation and be like, it's time for round 2.
Yeah, we're going to get into round 2 of our hot seat Q&A with your questions that you guys submitted inside the community, inside the Indie Pro community. We are super, super excited. We got through a bunch of great questions last week, and I'm pumped to just keep the good stuff rolling. Feeling festive as we go into the holiday season here. Just burning up about music marketing.
Let's do it. Let's dive right in.
Cool. I'm excited. The first question is a good one. It's about Patreon. What's your take on Patreon, and how do you differentiate the bonuses or the perks that you make in Patreon from the bonuses in your email? How do you treat them differently? That's a great question.
So I read this question, and tell me if you read it the same way, essentially as like, how do you differentiate the bribes to get people onto your email list and the content you give people on your email list from what happens inside your Patreon? Is that how you're reading it?
Yeah, basically like behind the scenes things that you might give your fans in Patreon and special perks that you might give your fans in Patreon. How do you differentiate that from the, special content that you might share with your email list alone? And I also think just like a general take on Patreon. I'll give my general take on Patreon. I like Patreon. We've done, and I'll link to it in the show notes, we've done a couple episodes on membership, building membership sites, how to not get overwhelmed with it. I like Patreon especially as like an entry starting point for building a membership site. Do I recommend it for everybody? No, I don't. Do I recommend it for anyone who has a fan base that they're ready to ascend? No, not necessarily. There's a lot of opportunity to build customized membership solutions that don't take a percentage, and that you have a lot of flexibility in terms of what you can do from a technical perspective, and really make it feel like it's a custom space, a world that's built just for your fans. But that said, Patreon is a really great starting place for building something to get your fans involved with you in a deeper way, to take your customers from, just being customers, repeat customers, to being in a place where they're recurring customers. You can do some pretty cool stuff with it. So I don't write Patreon off. I just don't think it's the end all be all. That's my feeling. What about you, Ed?
Yeah, I pretty much agree. There's instances where Patreon, for, if you're further along in your buddy system or your music career, then essentially, if you get Patreon, you're giving up a percentage, whereas if you could own all the information, you could integrate it in different ways. So I think, like you said, Patreon's a great place to start, and then over time, you might move away from it. But obviously, I think the heart of a membership site is great, and I think a good way to kind of get into this now, too, for the second part of the question is like, what do you do essentially to make your Patreon special, and how do you make it different from your email list, right? Because the question really is like, you want the people on your email list to feel special, but you want the people on your paid Patreon to feel even more special. So there's like varying degrees of importance where everybody's important, right? It's funny because we were actually talking about this today with the whole gang. And the way I kind of think about it is the people on your email list should always get early access to whatever you're rolling out. So say you have a release coming January 1st, okay? Or let's say the release is coming on March 1st. What I would do is say, okay, the email list should start getting access to that a month out. And then Patreon, in my mind, your paid members, they've been hearing the voice memos and, seeing like the songs come together in the recording studio, like all these kind of like stream of consciousness type things. That's where I think Patreon can be really good. So if you're looking for kind of buckets into how do I separate this out, that's how I would do it. Where Patreon is, hey, I got this new song idea. It's half finished, or hey, we recorded the vocals of this today. Like you're dropping content that's just like as it's happening. The email list in my mind is like teasers and or, hey, this album's done. Here's a 10-day, album launch experience. Be a part of it. That's kind of how I would differentiate it.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting take for sure. I agree with you, at least to the degree of like, I think the content that you create for a membership site is a bit more intentional. You might put together, like you said, like you might be giving the collections of voice memos or the demos or the studio videos and allowing your patrons or your members to be involved in the process of what it is that you're creating as you're creating it. Whereas your email list, the content that you're giving them, maybe you're sending an email once a week. Here, let's just use this hypothetical example. You're in the studio right now and you're making a record. Let's say you're in the studio for the next 2 months, spread out over the course of weeks. Maybe once a week, you're emailing your fans about a story that happened in the studio and you're just giving them like an update. Like, hey, I did this in the studio today. It was wild. Here's a photo of me from the studio. Maybe you also posted that on Instagram. Maybe you posted it on Facebook, the photo, but the kind of one-to-one nature of the messaging lives in email and your subscribers can get that. But your patrons or your members, for those people, maybe in that first month, like you had a whole treasure chest of demos that you recorded with your producer, and those people are the ones getting that. That's kind of how I think about like the buckets. With email, you can be more casual, I think, about the type of content that you share. Your band, Ed, is a great example of this. Like, I think you do email nurturing so well, not to make you blush or toot your horn here, but I think you do email nurturing so well in that it just feels very conversational. It's very casual. It's still valuable. It lets people into your world a little bit more than they would get on social, but it's not something that for regular, recurring email sends, not something that's part of a dedicated experience or a bribe, but for regular nurturing emailing, you keep it pretty manageable, the kind of stuff that you make. And then you can save that time and, the more dedicated content for your customers that are a little bit deeper.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was a lesson learned over time, because originally it was like, oh, we're going to do content pieces A, B, and C for the email list. And it was very quickly like, well, that's not going to work, right? So you kind of have to take a swing at where you think you can start and then adjust it to your realistic expectations. Or that's what we learned, like, okay, look, our email list is going to be very conversational. Like you said, it's going to be more text heavy. That's what we like to do. It's more like, hey, I'm checking in, or hey, here's a little sales promo, or hey, we just released a new video, A/B, like those kind of things that don't take much to send an email. It's like, takes me 20 minutes from idea to, drafting and scheduling. That kind of thing works for us. And then like you're kind of alluding to, we do develop content pieces that are, hey, this person sent us a box of chocolate from Europe and we're gonna compare it to how we think, chocolate in America tastes. And those are more intensive projects where we film that and then we edit it and all this kind of stuff. But people love that. And we drop that in what's not a paid membership site, but we drop it in our Facebook group, which is like our core. If we ever created a Patreon, those are the people that would join it. And so it's like, there's no wrong way to do it. You just want to make sure you're not burning yourself out, I think is important to note.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. We literally were just talking about this with the whole IndieX team today at our team meeting. It's a fascinating topic and it's a balance. I think you said it well in saying that you kind of learn this over time and there's trial and error and mistakes made and successes had. So I think separating your content into buckets like that is a good way to start. This is a more technical question. How low is too low to continue to run and get decent results on your opt-in ads? For example, how long could you keep ads running at $10 a day to get new subscribers before it's safe to reduce the budget and still get decent results, speaking generally? Hard to give a specific answer, not knowing the type of audience that you're running to. Generally speaking, I'll say this. If you're running to a warm audience for getting subscribers, taking your page engagement, your video views, your Instagram engagement audiences, if you're trying to retarget people and take them from not being on your list to being on your list with a permission stage campaign, I would say, one, you need to know the size of your audience, because eventually you're going to just keep spending money to hit the same people over and over again and just drive up your frequency. So that's one thing that you need to be aware of. And you can kind of watch that happening as you're monitoring your ads. You can watch the reach to impressions and how that's impacting and fluctuating based on the number of leads you're getting in, number of subscribers. But I'm going to make the assumption that we're talking about a warm audience here. Generally speaking, I like to run warm audiences at $10 a day, kind of as like my minimum, really. You can go lower. You could go to $5 a day, especially if you're starting to burn your audience down and you're getting your frequencies going up. That's what I would be paying attention to. If you're starting to see that, then you can start to spend lower. But in terms of continuing to get results, if that audience size isn't growing and you're just continuing to spend and spend and spend, eventually you're just going to be serving the same people the ads over and over and over again that aren't necessarily ready or prepared to buy. So varying your audience then and building up that warm audience is important. I don't necessarily think that there's a how long before you dial your budget down, if you should even be dialing your budget down at all. When it comes to conversions campaigns, $10 for me these days is kind of a minimum starting place to be competitive and to be able to win in the ad auction. So that's my take on that. You can get away with $5 a day. I wouldn't suggest going any lower than that, even if you are working with a smaller audience. And with cold audiences, cold traffic, this question kind of becomes, I think, even more sort of out there. I wouldn't recommend going for less than $10 a day when you're working with bigger audiences, bigger, colder audiences, because you're going to be, one, competing at a much larger level with a lot more advertisers. And because of that, not giving Facebook as much budget to play with to really optimize your ads. And that's something that I didn't even talk about. Not spending enough to keep yourself out of learning limited and staying optimized based on, needing to get 50 conversions within the conversion window. That's really, really important. So yeah, technical question. Ed, anything to add there?
I think that was a perfect technical answer for a technical question. Spot on.
Thank you, sir.
Very good. With that, I think we could roll on to the next one, which is there are so many outlets for an artist to pay attention to these days that take them away from writing. Social media platforms, making merch, making content. For Spotify, for example, the videos that are behind the tracks, planning touring, etc. How do you know what is going to be best for you, your project, and your time? I think this is a big question, obviously. If you're in IndiePro, my recommendation is to go to the training tracks and start there. But there's so many things here that, having worked, for the 502s myself and for all these IndieX clients that we work with and everybody on the team, just talking with them all the time, there's a lot of things here that at first glance seem like super, super important. And then as you're a couple years down the road into the digital marketing for music, it's like, okay, well, what are my real priorities? And, you have to have music, right? You have to have good music and good songs. So naturally, writing music, having good music in place, that's kind of a prerequisite. So that would probably be the priority in my mind. Outside of that, social media platforms, making merch, making content, planning, touring, all these things to me kind of boil down to secondary to making a great fan finder video, which in turn you can then repurpose into tons of different content, right? If you make a great video, then you can chop it up for your Spotify canvas. Making merch and planning touring, those come down the road. So I wouldn't even slot those that high, in my opinion, for someone that's just starting off. And setting up your social media platforms is pretty straightforward. So this question kind of, to me, is reading as, how do you know what's best for your project and your time? And I think that answer follows directly along with the buddy system, which is kind of what I was trying to dive into, which is, okay, look, if you're starting and you have nothing and you don't know where to start with a video and then just follow the buddy system from there, from introduction on down. And I do think that is applicable to anybody that is starting out. regardless of where you are.
I think that's a good way of saying it. I think it does in some ways depend on where you are and where you're currently seeing success, you know? We kind of covered this a ways back when we did the episode on building a roadmap for your music business and seeing where you're really at, you know, auditing your fan base, seeing where you're at, also seeing where you've been successful so far. Like if you're a touring artist that had a lot of success with touring, I don't want to sit here and pretend to tell you like, don't do that anymore, you know? Don't do the thing that's been working for you. Like then it's just a matter of figuring out like, well, okay, what is the next thing that's also working for me that I can continue to bolster? But I do think it depends on where you are. I think you said it well, Ed. I think the place that's best to focus on for you and your project is, for one, making sure that you've got good content, a good piece of content, a good fan finder, for example, a video and an ad campaign in place that you can use to get new listeners. That's kind of, you know, at the very, very top, that's kind of the lifeblood of growing an audience, is growing an audience.
Yeah.
As silly as that sounds, I think that that's really important and can serve any artist at whatever stage they're in, whether they're, a career-long artist that is about to release a new record to an artist that's just starting out and figuring out how to break into, you know, the digital marketing side of music marketing. I think that's a good place to start. And then from there, you know, auditing your base, seeing what's working for you right now and what hasn't been, what you're excited about, what gets you excited personally as an artist. And also if you're working with a band, what gets your bandmates and your team excited, and then focus in on those areas collectively together and bolster up the ones and focus on the ones that are going to put you in the right direction. And kind of that will allow you to tune out some of the noise of like, there's this new platform, or I need to be booking this show, or I need to be printing this merch. I think trying to compartmentalize that also is important and figure out who in your circle or on your team as you're building one is capable of doing the things that you don't necessarily want or need to be doing.
Yeah. And I think if there's one piece of advice I could give, it's when something starts working for you, just double down on it and start doing more of it. Like, that's been one of the biggest contributing factors to the continued growth and success of the 502s, is that we've had our thoughts and our following the buddy system and our roadmap of what we're doing. But if something has started to work, we've paused and we've just followed that path as long as possible until it starts to die down. And then you go find something else. But it's like using the buddy system as a framework for what you're doing is the way to head down the path to take the first step. And then just look for something that's working, wait till you do, find it, and then double down. Whether that's a fan finder video that's killing it and you can save your money up and just put budget into it, or Jack and I, for example, recently have been testing TikTok stuff and TikTok ads, and it's like, it's working. We don't know how long it will work for, or if it will ever be worth like diving into totally to, you know, share what we're doing, because it might flame out, but it's like, it's working. We're going to keep going after it. Same thing with Instagram Reels when it happened. And it's like, just follow stuff until it kind of flames out would be, I think, a good recommendation on how to figure out what's best for your project in your time. Because ultimately what you probably want to see as somebody who's investing time and money and effort is some kind of positive result.
That's well said. I think if we could summarize like both of our feelings on this topic is like, number one, like audit your business, audit your creativity, audit your fan base, roadmap out where you want to be going based on that, double down on what's currently working. And then finally, like we were kind of talking about on last week's episode and with some of the questions, is like aim to be content first, especially in a digital world where content is going to become the thing that connects you to fans. Those would be like my three.
And if I would just tack on to the end of that there, I would just say, like, enjoy what you're doing as well. You know, like, this isn't a sprint. It's a long-term thing that you're slowly building your ecosystem. So just because you stay up, 7 days in a row and you don't sleep and you get your merchandise made and you plan out a tour, if you're not enjoying it, like, just day after day, step after step, go after it.
Yeah. So speaking of all of the things that the 502s are doing, this next question is a good one, I think. Talking about experimenting, I'm wondering how the 502s are experiencing so much success with Spotify. I know their songs are killer, but I'm wondering if the Spotify success is just following from regular email list building or if they're doing anything experimental. Congrats to you guys for killing it. Yeah, let's hear it, Ed. What are you guys working on? We can talk about this for days.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting, right? Because the streaming until like the last maybe month or two, it's not something we've ever intentionally focused on. And essentially what's going on with our streaming right now is that we had some videos go viral on TikTok last year, like November. And then after that, nothing really. And then Instagram Reels ads were introduced a couple months ago. And then TikTok ads got a little bit better a couple months ago. And so Jack and I had the idea pretty much to say, hey, why don't we see if we can leverage this already viral content into increased streaming? So, we've had a good string of success on TikTok with virality over the last couple of years. We were joking. I think the 502s have probably had, 10 to 15 viral videos in the last year, which has definitely contributed to that growth of the streaming number. But then pretty much what we've been doing is testing just various ways to leverage Instagram Reels, TikTok ads, and kind of see how that plays into streaming. And it's working. It's helping us increase our streaming numbers, our listeners, our followers, our daily streams, all that kind of stuff. And if it continues to trend that way, it's definitely something that we're going to dive in and kind of, walk you guys through what's going on. But it's only about a month or two old. We're testing it, and it really is existing on the back of viral content that we already had that we filmed as fan finders.
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to what we were saying about content is like you guys have had a lot of really great assets that you've created over the past, few years that have kind of yielded dividends in terms of their use on different platforms from TikTok to Facebook to Instagram and probably whatever else comes out next, and being able to leverage those in a variety of ways, looking as an outsider here, it has been one of the major pieces contributing to just like the overall sort of Spotify growth recently. In addition to all the other work that you guys have been doing on the fan base building side, like obviously that's given you guys a baseline as well.
Right, exactly. That's what I was going to say. This kind of goes back to last week. We were talking about being consistent, right? Because something I've seen is that yes, we've had these viral videos and that's been awesome. At the same time, these viral videos are getting initially comments from people that have known us for 2 or 3 years because they were part of the party. They were part of Camp Feels Good. And they're like, man, this is awesome. We love you guys. And as other people have come into our ecosystem, they've been greeted by this kind of baseline of welcoming. We have a very welcoming fan base that we've kind of always said, hey, whoever wants to come hang out, you guys are welcome to be in the 502s fam. So it's not just like, we put up a video, went viral, and then we started running Reels and TikTok ads. The baseline, like you said, has set such a good precedent going forward, whether it's on streaming or email list, whatever. That's kind of an important distinguishing factor. And at the same time, I think that this also touches on the last question where it's like, look, we've been going after the Instagram Reels and TikTok ads pretty freaking hard together, the last 2 months. And it's like, who knows how long it's going to last, but it's fun. We're trying to innovate. We're trying to test. We're really putting the 502's budget into this test to just see what happens. And it's going well. But I mean, I was joking with Jack last week, it was down, and I told him I was depressed because it was down. It's not like it's all just like, oh man, this is fantastic. It's the same thing we tell you guys. It's like, hey, this is working, test it, try it, see what's working for you guys, see what you can shake loose. If it stops working, what's the pivot? What's another pivot? We're on like our 5th pivot now when it comes to TikTok ads, and finally it looks like maybe it's saving itself. But so to answer the question is kind of like, what's playing into the Spotify success? It's the longevity, it's the fan base that we have, and it's just the desire to continue to test things with the budget we have available to see if we can make some progress. Yeah,
totally. That's just a little insight into the 502's world. I hope you guys like that.
There you go.
This is a question. This reminds me of something we talked about on last week's Q&A. I'm live streaming every weekday, and in every stream, I finish a draft of a track, which will be processed further. Talk about consistency. Next year, I'm planning to release one of these tracks per week, adding up to 48 tracks for 2022. How would you approach marketing this kind of entity? Man, I will give you my gut feeling on this. One, I think the consistency is awesome. I think the traction that you will get from doing this will be really, really cool to see. But what I would probably say is like, identify a few tracks of these that you feel would be good candidates for long form performance style video. Create those videos, and then you'll have a few fan finders to test throughout the year as these songs drop, so that you can grow your listener base as you're continuing to drop each track as like recurring content. I would also say take those live streams, if you've been recording them, chop them up into micro content that you can use on Instagram, that you can use on Facebook, that you can use in Reels, on TikTok, so on and so forth. It sounds like you'll have a crap ton of content that you can play with. So you may not even need to create ancillary content, but you totally could. And I think, one way or another you should, whether it's from the streams or whether it's content that you're creating for these tracks as you go. But I think having a rollout of content to go with each one of these tracks would be great. As you start to build up an audience base, potentially giving folks an option to get early access could be a very easy bribe if people are feeling hype about the fact that you're releasing so many songs at such a rapid clip. That would be just some of the first things that come to my mind. But you want to essentially get consistency in listeners, and you can do that through long form video with Fan Finder. You want to get consistent education happening of people who are now in your world and are continuing to come into your world. And you can do that with the extra content that you build. And since you've already got some, you've got some stuff in your back pocket that you can kind of chop up and use. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. First of all, Jack said the consistency to be doing that and have that number of tracks to roll out, that's fantastic. So props to you. I would probably also say check out Some Kid Punk, like Circus thing. They do a really good job of these daily content pieces, which it sounds like could be really applicable for you. So that would be maybe one place to check out. And then, thinking about how to maybe leverage that into some kind of email list sign up would be a great thing too. So I think, like Jack said, you got a lot of great content in the can, and those are hopefully a couple ideas that will be really helpful in helping you make the most out of it.
Definitely. And I would say also, we'll link to a Circus project, Some Kid Punk, in the show notes, but also check out Inside of Indie Pro, the Content Blitz Blueprint training, and also the Grow Your Permission List training. I think that those would also be two good ones to be kind of keeping close to you as you're going through this process, as well as turning listeners into fans. Those three trainings, I think, would be solid pillars to be leaning into as your audience starts to grow and as you look to market these songs.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, I think the next question, we got two more questions for y'all. The next question is, how do you successfully upsell / bundle / create offers that people can't say no to? And I actually think that this is a relatively straightforward answer that a lot of people get too in their heads about.
I was just thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay, how do you make a good offer, right? And there's two things that I like to do. One is, if you're in a band, talk with your bandmates and say, here's what I think is cool. Do you think the same thing is cool? If not, why? And then talk through until you find something cool, and to give you some direction. Signed items always do really well. Bundles do really well. We just did a crew neck that came with a free calendar for 2022 and a sticker. It was discounted 50%. Discounts, free items, signed items, bundling things together. Those are all kind of a path for you to start on, but there's really no wrong answer when it comes to creating offers. The only thing I can think of that you want to keep in mind is that you don't want your margins to be garbage, and you don't want to take a huge hit. Like, you are selling products. You do want to, for something like this, you do want to get some kind of at least break even or slight profit. But outside of that, it's like, just get creative with it and talk to your bandmates. And option two is, if you don't have any bandmates to talk to about that, talk to your fans. Send them a survey, jump on a Facebook Live video, and just throw it out there. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think about this? Like, is there anything else you would like? Really kind of good example of this is that we just did a little clearance sale for the 502s, and it was set to launch on like December 3rd or something. And 2 days before it, somebody DM'd us and said, hey, I would really, really love it if you guys could do a beanie at some point in the next year. And so I just went on, made a beanie on Printful, and added it to this collection because somebody asked for it, and we sold like 5 of them. And, it's just like, oh, this random girl DM'd us and, her suggestion made us $150. And it's like, just talk to your fans. They'll tell you what they want,
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with you. I think like as far as the creativity of offers goes, you can't really go wrong with talking to your fans. Surveying your fans is a great way to find out the things that they like that will reduce the friction of people are going to be less inclined to say no to an offer if you're making them an offer for something that they've actually already raised their hand and said that they want. This is just kind of like sales psychology, right? Additionally, I think that there are a few kind of core concepts to keep in mind here. One, in addition to looking at surveying your fans, look at your data. What do your fans already buy from you? Ed and I were talking the other day about one of our clients at IndieX, and we were saying, it's become very apparent to us that their fans buy their music, like they buy physical copies of their music. So as we run more promotions and as we create more offers, we want to play into that desire that these fans already have and find ways to include music in any of these bundles. So if we're trying to sell, hoodies, find a way to sell some music with it, because that might be the thing that people really, really want. So finding ways to give people what it is they've already raised their hand and said that they want, either through asking them, surveying them, or looking at your actual purchase data, is a really great place to start. And then just leaning on sales principles. We go over a lot of this inside of the how to generate sales all year round training inside IndiePro. I'll link to that in the show notes for any of you who are not inside of IndiePro if you want to check it out. But 3 concepts to pay attention to here: urgency, scarcity, and exclusivity are really important. This is how you make offers that are super compelling. You make them to a subset of your fans and you make them feel special. You make them feel like the offer is specifically being made for them, just for them at that time. So it might be, just your customer list. It might be just your email list. It might be, just your Patreon members like we were talking about. And that doesn't mean that you can't make the offers to other people at a different time, but making these people feel like they're getting something exclusively, making a person feel like they're getting something exclusively for them, adding some urgency to it in terms of a timeline as when it's going to go away, whether that means the actual offer is going to be taken down, or maybe if you're adding bonuses to it, the bonuses will go away. And then finally, scarcity. If there's a limited amount, let people know that there's a limited amount. During the 502 sales promo for Black Friday that we ran, we saw leaps and bounds that sales continuously ticked up when we told fans how sales were going. We only have 5 left of this happiness calendar bundle with the holiday ugly sweater and a calendar that you guys made. And those sales, that was not fake scarcity. That was very, very real. And in letting people know that, we moved, closer and closer to the point of them selling out, to the point where we actually had to change our copy a couple times in the emails that we were sending. So those 3 principles I think are really important to focus on, as well as, finding out what it is that your fans really, really want.
I think that's a good point. Everything you just said is awesome. I would advise against overdoing the fake scarcity.
Oh, totally. Don't do fake scarcity at all. Make it real. It has to be real.
Right. And so I think a good clarifying point there is if you only have 10 of something, and you sell 6 of them, you still only have 4 left. But I've seen it come back to bite people when they're like, the first email, we only have 4 of these. And then 4 emails later, we only have 2 left. And it's okay, well, your fans aren't stupid. You don't want to lie to them. So that's something, us selling out of our sweatshirts, like Jack was saying, that's something that has been built upon and earned over the last couple of years, where it's okay, we really do only have 75 of these. Oh crap, they're gone. And we're sitting here man, I wish we would have got more, but at least people know we're serious when we say we really don't have something. And I think over time, that's more valuable than selling 6 more sweatshirts this year.
Yeah, that trust is so important. And, selling 4 more shirts and shattering the trust of your fans is not really worth it.
Exactly.
That's so good.
We got one more question, which I'm going to let Jack dive into for y'all around Web3.
Web3, this is a good question. Do we know of any cool projects, communities that are helping and developing around musicians in Web3, and any tech that we've come across in the Web3 world that would be a resource for artists to get into, that would kind of simplify what Web3 is all about, how it involves websites, and what the benefit is for artists when it comes to Web3. This is a really fascinating topic, and to be totally honest, it's new to me as well as you, Ed. I actually spoke with Cirque ahead of time, who is way more well-versed and way deeper into the blockchain, cryptocurrency, and Web3 enthusiast space about some of this. But just to give like a basic definition, right? What is Web3? It's the concept of a new epoch of the internet. You know, in the 90s, we had Web 1.0. And then as we got into the late 90s and into the 2000s, and we're in Web 2.0 right now, where primarily, you know, commerce happens online through credit card processing and PayPal and the corporations that run the internet, with big, massive companies like Facebook and Google and everything that exists in the internet as we know it today. Web 3 is a concept about the future of the internet, a future of the internet that would be decentralized and based on peer-to-peer technologies like blockchains, like blockchain technology, where, for example, in a Web3 world, you would maybe have a website where fans could connect their cryptocurrency wallet to your website and make purchases that way. That is, you know, just a very, very layman's term idea of what Web3 could look like. Very, very basic. Like I said, this is a massive world of speculation right now, and what it could mean for the arts and for creativity is totally speculative and future thinking, and there's no definitives at all. The recommendation that I would think about, and that I also spoke with Circa about, and that Ed and I were chatting about before we got into this episode, was, you know, when it comes to the blockchain space and Web3, if it's something that interests you, focus more on learning about Web3 and how it can implicate music and art by meeting and learning from people that are currently in the space. Whether they're doing things with art, music, entertainment, whatever it might be, just dig into where people in the Web3 space are hanging out. Twitter is a good space for it. Discord is certainly a great place for it. I do a fair share of hanging out in that, not nearly as much as Cirque, but it is definitely something that I've been learning a lot about. And we're going to be talking a lot more about in 2022 and as the years go by, for sure. But I will say this, as you dive into the world of Web3, you'll learn faster as you just first get a foundation on some of the basics of what a blockchain is, how cryptocurrency works. And as you start to learn that, the more you learn on that front, the more the path for you as an artist and a creative will start to reveal itself. Don't worry too much about, you know, how it benefits your website right now or what you can do today, because the space is changing and will continue to change and is not formed. It's totally formless and not molded. But as far as some resources go, there are a few to check out, and I'll link to them in the show notes. But one is Songcamp. You can hop into their Discord, check out Songcamp on Twitter. You can also follow these accounts and other accounts that they recommend that are in the space. And like I said, hop into Discord, talk with people, hang out, and just get a lay of the land. I'll link to some of these accounts, Koopa Troopa, Catalog Works, and Matthew Kime on Twitter. We'll put them in the show notes so that you guys can check them out. But that is a very, very basic kind of starting point definition of Web3, some of the things that we think about it, and some of the resources that you might find interesting. And like I said, we'll be digging more into that in the new year and as the future starts to unfold with Web3 and how it all relates to music and music marketing and the music business. So I'm excited about it. It's something cool that I'm trying to learn more and more about every single day. But I hope that gives a solid kind of starting point answer. Man, we are going into the holidays. I'm feeling festive. For any of you guys celebrating Christmas, I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. For any of you not and celebrating other holidays or not celebrating any holiday, I hope you have happy holidays or just a fantastic rest of the week. We'll be back on the next episode to talk about some of our predictions for 2022, and I'm pretty stoked to chat about this. What do you think, Ed?
Absolutely. We'll talk to you all next week.
Sounds good. Peace out, Indies. Thanks for listening.
Can y'all really feel the East Coast, feel the West Coast?